Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Catheta webinar. We are coming to you live on April 3rd, 2025. For anyone who doesn't know, our Catheta webinars get their name from the Creek word for learning. Today, you're going to be learning about forecasting for federal grants from your instructor, Diane Leonard, who is the principal at D.H. Leonard Consulting and Grant Writing Services. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're also thrilled that you could be with us today for the webinar. If you could follow along, please, while I read the disclaimer aloud. This webinar is a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We also have our copyright infringement law printed here. So just a friendly reminder that the webinar materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. For anybody who is new on the learning platform, just to let you know, all of the resources and the different webinars that we've done in the past here on the platform can be found in the courses section. If you decide you want to share slides or recordings with anybody, that's where you can find all of them. And then moving forward, now that you're on the website and you've been registered, you'll be able to access any of the webinars that we do in the future. You don't have to re-register or anything. You're already good to go. You'll just log in at the time that the webinar is happening, and you'll click on that green banner to join just like you did today. We do ask that you typically join with listen-only capabilities. It just helps us cut down on any audio feedback. And if you've joined and you realize that your sound is coming out of an incorrect device, maybe there's a speaker that you prefer to use. If you want to see how to change that, you'll just come down to that telephone icon at the bottom of your screen, and it'll bring up a list of your mic and your audio devices, and you can select the proper output that you want to use. We do have several ways to interact during the webinar today. We will primarily use the public chat. If you don't already have it expanded, you can come to the left-hand menu panel, and you'll click on public chat and it'll bring it open. You should already see some messages from me in there. But if you have a question, you have a comment at any point during the webinar, or maybe you're having some tech support issues you'd like me to help you navigate, you'll just come over to where it says send message to public chat, click in that box, type what you would like to say, and then you can either hit your enter button or you can click on that little paper airplane icon, and that'll send it into the public chat where everyone can see it. We also have a shared notes section. In there, you'll find lots of different helpful links for today, including the webinar feedback survey, the presentation slides, different links that are going to come up during the presentation. You can register for our newsletter. All that stuff is in there. I have already included the link to the presentation slides in the public chat, so that's available for you. If you found that you did join with your mic unmuted, no worries. Come down here and mute yourself until you're ready to ask a question or anything like that. And if you've asked something in the chat or you made a comment and you feel like we might have missed you along the way, you could always use the hand raise feature to draw attention to it for us. All right, folks, if you didn't already expand your public chat, let's all go over to that left-hand menu and expand the public chat. And you can let us know what your name is, where you're tuning in from today, your work or your role in Indian country that led you to today's webinar, and then your tribal affiliation if you have one. And while y'all are getting the chat box fired up, I do just have one quick warning, or more like a note, sorry. But if you click on that red hand menu panel that's all the way to the left of your screen, just know that it's going to immediately pull you from the webinar and it's going to take you to whatever you selected. If that does happen, you could just click on the green banner once again to join. But I do just want to give you a heads up that if you click on that red menu panel, it will pull you from the webinar. But you can always rejoin. All right, folks, while you guys are introducing yourselves in the chat, it is with great pleasure that I introduce today's webinar instructor, Diane Leonard. And Diane, I have made you presenter. You can take over now.
Thank you, Brooke. Hello, everyone. It is so good to be with you today as we are talking about forecasting for federal grants here at the Native Learning Center. Pleased to see lots of names that I recognize from recent grant-related sessions, but I don't recognize all your names, so a quick introduction, if you don't mind. So, a little bit about me and why it is that I love talking about all things grants. My name's Diane, and I'm the president and owner of D.H. Leonard Consulting, and we're in our 20th year, which means we have seen lots of change in our field, in our sector over those years, constantly evolving. And when I think about grants, There is stress and pressure that can be involved because our organizations, your tribal communities, we all rely on this funding to do our meaningful work, to make our communities better. And because grants can be so stressful, one of the things that has always been on my bio slide that I want to call out and ask for maybe you to share in the public chat if you're so willing is what is it that you're using to help fuel your work, to help stay focused on what you have to do in terms of applications and writing and maybe reporting. For me, it means running. It was raining really hard, so I went with indoor cycling today, but checked the movement box. And I would say 1 good cup of coffee, but my team said I could have 2 today. So I've had 2 really good cups of freshly brewed coffee today. If you want to let me know in the public chat what is fueling your work today, I'd love to hear. Maybe it's related to movement or what you're eating or drinking. Maybe it's related to another form of self-care. Maybe it's related to something that of impact, the work you're doing right now. All answers welcome, certainly not required. But I'd love to use that as a way to think about what is it that we are bringing in terms of our best selves to this conversation today. And Shasta, I am not mad about it. Donuts, always donuts. That's fantastic. Deneen, good to see you again. And yoga, fantastic. Well, again, optional if you want to share a few more thoughts to help get things situated. The reason I like to help bring you into that public chat space is that we have a lot of material we're going to cover in our 90 minutes together today. And I will, at the very end, ask if you have any outstanding questions. And you can see on the agenda on your screen right now that I've got a Q&A. I've got a bookmark right for it. I really don't want to make you wait till the end for any of your questions, especially when we get into some of these more technical screen grabs related to the different websites that I'm going to show you to do the federal forecasting work. So this public chat, I'm watching it the whole time. It's right in the center of my screen. If you have a question related to any of the content, please don't wait for me to say, do you have any questions? You are welcome to ask me questions in the public chat at any time. Federal forecasting is something that is, I would say it's an intermediate plus in terms of grant level skill that we're talking about. The idea of federal forecasting is something that is a deeper dive into the research portion of the grant life cycle. If you've been in any of our grant writing webinars before here at the Native Learning Center that I've presented, you've likely seen this image in the context of whatever the topic may be. It is my one probably go-to slide that you could, pretty much anticipate will be in any one of our slide decks because this reminds us what are our best practices. So the grant life cycle, if you haven't seen it before, quick overview, these are our 5 best practices in grant seeking. And we can approach this image like we would if we were looking at a clock on the wall. And we'll think about our 12 o'clock position where readiness is. That's where we start. And then as we move clockwise around the image, we think about our readiness. Are we eligible? Are we technically ready to apply? Research is about who are our best fit funders. That's where people normally think about federal forecasting. We then continue moving clockwise to relationships, trying to make connections, build contacts, build relationships with grant makers of all shapes and sizes. Once we have done those first 3, we use what we have learned to customize our writing so that it is as competitive as possible. And then lastly, because our hard work, it has worked, we get the grant award, we celebrate, we ding our yellow dingy bell, and then we focus on our grant management, the reporting work, so that we can start all over again. I have a question for you, though. Where within those 5 grant cycle elements, where do you think federal forecasting fits? I've given you a clue for where most people think about it, but there's a bigger, a more expanded answer that I'd like you to consider. Where does federal forecasting fit? If you want to share in the public chat what grant life cycle element, which of those 5 R's, readiness, research, relationships, writing, and reporting, Where are the elements in the grant life cycle where you think you could do some federal forecasting work? Let me know what you think. Maybe just 10 seconds or so to type in one of those items to make it easier to think about what your options are. I'll go back one slide real quick so that you can see them on the screen. Which element, or during which elements, plural if you prefer, where do you think that federal forecasting could take place? I see we've got some folks saying readiness. Got some folks coming in with research. All right, so we've got a few options so far. Where can it fit? It is my opinion, based on our years of doing federal forecasting with a wide variety of organizations, that the answer is everywhere. I know that was sort of a trick question, wasn't it? Because literally any time we are taking any action with grants, we might learn something that would help us with our federal forecasting. So I applaud and I agree with your answers, but I would like you to think about it in an expanded way. Anytime you're learning something about your organization's priorities, you're making connections with relationships, you're thinking about how you would report to stay a good grantee, there will be multiple opportunities in each of those life cycle elements where you might learn something that would bring you back into these federal forecasting tools that we're going to look at today. So please consider federal forecasting to be something that is always on your mind. Our federal forecasting, it's ever evolving. So I want to acknowledge that it looks different to do federal forecasting literally each and every year. With each and every administration, it is constantly evolving. And it evolves for a few different reasons. It evolves because of changes in technology. My goodness, the team at grants.gov has been focusing on simplifying and strengthening their systems and their online interfaces literally for years. So we have that type of ongoing change, which brings about different tools. We have the idea of increased transparency in terms of where federal dollars are spent. The Data Act has been around for well over a decade. That's part of why there is more visibility to us about how dollars have been spent. And then, of course, there's what happens when there are different changes in elections and different administration. All of those combined, when I reflect on my 20 years in business, my 25 years as a grant professional, those are all reasons that create change related to federal forecasting. So what we're talking about today is about where are things now? What do my tools look like in my toolbox today? And how is it that we're going to make them fantastic tools for you as well? Before we think about the tools, I know I didn't put bring a toolbox to class in the description. It's a digital toolbox, so it doesn't have to be something too heavy that we have to carry. But before we think about any of those digital tools, I want us to consider what type of application is best suited for pre-planning. When we think about pre-planning, what sort of work that you might be doing might be best suited for this idea of pre-planning? If we're thinking about funding programs that typically operate on a regular cadence, we anticipate that it opens each year. We anticipate maybe that it opens every other year. We anticipate that it opens every 3 years. Those are the types of programs that federal forecasting can really give us a head start, a competitive advantage for. If they are funding programs that, regardless of when they are released, typically require extensive collaboration, that gets a thumbs up from me in terms of the type of application, the type of funding that would be great to consider for pre-planning. If it's a program that you have applied for and received funding from, or applied for, unfortunately were denied, but got some feedback, so you want to try again, both of those scenarios are also a great situation to consider for pre-planning. When we think about, well, what wouldn't make sense? What might we not spend time forecasting and pre-planning on. If it's a funding program that does not operate on a regular cadence, it might have been a one-time special thing. We saw some of those during the pandemic. We wouldn't, unless we saw published information in a federal forecast or in a specific approved budget, unless we saw information saying it's supposed to come back again, I wouldn't recommend forecasting and pre-planning for something that probably was a one-time funding program. And if it's not in the federal budget, I don't think it's going to be the best use of your time for pre-planning, for forecasting work. There are many other things that we can always spend our time on as a grant professional. Now, there are two primary phrases that I'm using today, and I want to explain the difference between the two. I'm going to dive deeper into both for you, but there are two big phrases related to this work of federal forecasting. So when we talk about forecasting for federal grants, what we're trying to do as a grant professional is identify which opportunities may open, which opportunities do we think will open, which opportunities do we feel rather confident will open, somewhere in those options, so that we could potentially get a bit of a head start. We could think about it, talk about it before it actually opens, because that gives us a competitive edge against the other organizations that might apply. So that's what federal forecasting is about, understanding which opportunities may open. The second part, the phrase that I just talked about with pre-planning, is the action of saying, I found something that is forecasted. I believe it will open based on some indicators, based on the tools we're about to use. Now what? The now what is the pre-planning, the action of getting a little head start, taking some actions to prepare as best you can before the actual application opens. So we'll talk about that in a very short, succinct way at the end of today's session, but I also want to point out that we've talked about it in a bigger way here at the Native Learning Center. So some of the previous recorded webinars might be a valuable resource for you. But because I use both of those phrases in today's conversation, I wanted to explain the difference between the two. All right, does everyone have their digital toolbox ready? We are going to look at a variety of all free government websites that are going to give us the information needed to do some federal forecasting. What do we need to know before we put any tools into our digital toolbox? And the reason I like the toolbox analogy so much, just a quick aside, is that if you think about a quick fix-it project, sometimes you need a tape measure, sometimes you need a screwdriver, sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a handsaw, sometimes you need all of the tools. Sometimes you're going to use one of the digital tools I'm talking about today, sometimes you're going to use them all. And I want you to understand what the tools are in your digital toolbox and how to use them. Portfolio could also work. Think about what's in your list of bookmarks, what's in your portfolio of options that are going to support you. I'm in favor of any phrase that makes you think about how you will use these items to best forecast for federal grants. Here's the starting question for you. Which agency, so which federal agency or sub-department do you think is the one that you want to get funding from the most? The one that you want to pay the most attention to in the upcoming 12 months. Could you please let me know in the public chat which agency or sub-department, if you know. If you're not sure, you can give me a question mark or say not sure yet. But if you know, which agency or sub-department do you think is going to be where you spend the most time focusing your forecasting efforts? You certainly could watch more than one, but as you learn the skill of forecasting in these tools, I'd like to have you focus on one for your testing and for your practice. And as you become more comfortable, you certainly can start to watch and forecast with more. There is not a right or wrong answer here. It can be any of the federal agencies or departments. When we think about your answer, whether you have said it's HUD, so Housing and Urban Development, if you're thinking about HHS, Health and Human Services, if you're thinking about FEMA, emergencies, management, doesn't matter which agency you're thinking about, I have a secondary question for you. You don't have to type it into the chat for me, but I want you to think about which is the broad policy goal that the work aligns with. So for example, Charlene said HUD, Housing and Urban Development. So I think, make a little assumption. I think it could be okay, not too far off the mark, that we could say housing policy could be what you're thinking about. Oh, but there are some healthy housing programs. So actually there could be some health policy related there too. So it's okay. See how I have policy goals, plural, on the screen? It's okay if you have a few answers for big, broad ideas about policy goals that your work might align with. The reason that it's helpful for us to understand, before we look at a single tool, what agency is probably the one we're most focused on, and what big, broad policy goals might align with the type of work we want funding for, it helps us to think about what funding programs exist. So again, Charlene, thanks to you. The last one in the chat typed in their agency, and so that's the one that's front of mind for me. And so if you're thinking about that type of work with HUD, and I said, oh, it could be actually housing policy, it could actually be some health policy, but what sort of programs have been funded in the past? I could think about first-time home buyer counseling and support. I could think about senior home renovations and those types of expenses being supported. I could think about healthy housing lead abatement programs. There's a lot of different programs that have existed that I could look at to find out, well, where have the dollars gone that are related to the type of work that I do? Sometimes you might be surprised by what program exists where. I saw the Bureau of Justice was called out now in the chat. Sometimes there's some surprising projects in the past that have been related to workforce development. Like, wait a second, Bureau of Justice, not Department of Labor? And it might make sense for it to be with Bureau of Justice if it's related to reentry programs. So while there's the agency that you think you're going to focus on, when we're thinking about the big programs, the things that maybe we've seen in the news or that we've heard others talk about funding, maybe peer organizations, sometimes there's a bit of a surprise. So I do want you to consider some of the other programs that might exist. They might not be the agency you are thinking of, but they are still aligned with the policy goals that you are considering. So here on the screen, I've got some different programs, some of the big ones in terms of past dollar amounts. So under Health and Human Services, Head Start programming for early Head Start and Head Start. Wait a second, isn't that about education? Well, you might have thought it would be there, but it exists under Health and Human Services. I talked about how sometimes those employment programs you might expect Department of Labor, and that's what's on the screen, but sometimes we've seen some under Bureau of Justice. I see on the screen Department of Housing and Urban Development, which I gave a few examples for, but energy innovation, the word energy is in it. It doesn't mean that it has to be under Department of Energy. It has existed under HUD. The way that we can think about where the programs exist, which agency they're under, well, that's going to be something we can learn more through the tools we're going to look at in a moment. But before we open a specific tool and start any of our searching, we need to think about the budget for the US government. Yes, like almost any federal grant related document, it is a very large PDF. You heard me make my opening remarks related to what's fueling my work and my coffee. Anytime I read federal guidelines or the federal budget, you guessed it, I have a fresh cup of coffee at the ready. Whether coffee was what you said in the chat when we got warmed up or not, it's a big document to process. What I want you to consider is not reading the whole thing. You're welcome to, but no pressure that you have to. What I would like you to read is the section about the department or the agency that you are most interested in. The one that you typed into the public chat, or the one that you thought about just a few slides ago. I would like you to read that section. And when reading that section, I would like you to put particular emphasis during your reading on what is being called out in the document for increases or for decreases. Where are there expected to be changes? This gives you some framing before you get into any of our digital tools. So you'll have a few pages of reading. I gave you a screen grab from Department of Justice as the example. It was calling out in this particular budget how there was going to be increased funding available. But we'll see both projected up and projected down, sometimes status quo staying the same. All right, we have our agency in mind. Perhaps agencies plural, but let's go with one as we're thinking about our tools today. Where I would like to start our work is in a tool at sam.gov, sam.gov. Please note again that everything I am going to show you today is free. They do require registrations at different points in where you are in their process and utilizing them, but always free. If ever you end up using a search engine to try and find one of these tools and it tries to make you pay for it, back out. You have clicked on an ad in your search engine. There is nothing here that you should pay for. Also, I want to give a huge shout out in advance to Brooke because I'm sharing a lot of links today and Brooke is helping to make sure that they get into the public chat for you. So the first of the tools is sam.gov. Sam.gov is, yes, the same sam.gov where organizations who want to receive federal dollars are required to maintain an annual registration. But sam.gov has many different elements to it. And when we are on the home page, there is a particular section that I want you to look for. It's called the assistance listing. When you click on search, we want to go to the assistance listings. We don't have to be logged in as we get started. But the assistance listings are going to help us understand who is currently getting money, what has been appropriated in terms of big dollar amounts for the programs. It's going to help us understand how much has been spent in the past. It can give us actually more than just immediate past. It can give us past years, multiple years worth of data for programs that have been around for a while. And it will often make a forward-looking projection about what should be or might be the amount available in an upcoming fiscal year. There's a whole bunch of might. I always, when looking at the what might happen forward-looking in sam.gov, there's what it says, but it doesn't matter what's happening. There is always some sort of, I like my magic 8-ball from the 80s here, there's always some sort of unpredictable element. We don't want to treat that as the absolute. It is only a potential projection. When we're in sam.gov, yes, you could type a quick word or phrase into this basic search. What I would recommend you do instead is click on Advanced Search, which brings you to this screen. You can then apply a filter. The reason that I want you to consider applying filters, not starting on the generic search and putting in a phrase like housing or health or education, I don't want you to start at such a high level word or phrase and that basic search, is that you will have so much information to review that you will not be able to meet the beverage at the desk rule. I used to call it a coffee cup rule, but not everyone drinks coffee at all or even at their desk. So we're going to go with the beverage at the desk rule. If you are applying filters when using these tools related to federal forecasting, I want you to have enough filters applied that you feel confident. You can read through your information and your results and decide what you're going to take action on or not before it is time to refill the beverage at the desk, whether that means grabbing a new can of seltzer out of the office fridge, making a new mug of tea, or refilling your very large Awala water bottle. Doesn't matter what the beverage is at the desk, I want you to be able to read through your results before it's time to rehydrate again. The first filter that you could try applying could be under federal organization. So the agency that you said you are most interested in is a nice way to quickly set aside the things that are very unlikely to be relevant to you. The second filter I would apply would be now a keyword. Now that you are within the structure of the tool, getting the agency or the department you care about the most, now a basic high-level keyword could really be helpful. What I'd like for you to imagine is that you have just put in the keyword opioid. And I understand that's not work that everyone's trying to find grants for right now. You're doing a wide variety of things in your tribal organizations. So maybe one or two of you are like, oh, sure, yeah, let's talk about opioid funding. But it's an example that I'd like to use because I literally have been taking screen grabs of this funding opportunity an embarrassingly long time. Since 2018. Right? What's a grant professional to do? Yep, just keep collecting screen grabs about some particular funding opportunities. And the more that I have gathered, the cooler I think the story becomes for what you can learn when you forecast. So on the screen is what this opportunity looked like. The Comprehensive Opioid Stimulant and Substance Abuse Program. All opportunities within SAM.gov have the same menu on the left-hand side. The time of the image, assistance listing had overview, authorizations, financial information, criteria for applying for assistance, compliance requirements, contact information, and history. It is not where we apply. This is here whether it is open for application at this moment or not. This always stays. Back when I first started taking the images related to this opportunity, at the time, this was a relatively new funding program. In its first year, what we could see in the history was that it had $11.7 million in funding. It, unfortunately, we know how things have happened with the need for opioid support. It went way up in year 2. It was supposed to have $145 million. So what happened in the accomplishment section, if you were to be forecasting way back, we have gone back in time together to 2018. If we were looking at this, we would say, wow, this is a program that grew rapidly. And because it grew rapidly, literally almost every single application last year got funded because there was so much more money, but the number of applications didn't expand at the same time at such a volume. So literally almost every application got funded, all but 4. But what's that going to mean looking forward? The money was expected to actually go way down. Spoiler alert, it didn't. But there was projected to be 180 applications received. When federal money goes up, the year after, there is often a lagging increase in the number of applications because more people became aware of the opportunity. It was highly publicized. There were news articles, and congresspeople and senators did promotion when things got awarded in their district. So over time, an increase in federal dollars in a program that's going to open again will often, not always, lead to a lagging increase in the number of applications as well. And that's what we could see what happened here. Well, so what? Well, if you know this is happening, now you have to consider that this is going to be an incredibly competitive process that you are considering being a part of, more than ever before. Let's bring it a little closer to current day. Over time, the look of the website, it's evolved. It still has the same sections. I was right. I gave you that spoiler alert. The dollars did unfortunately not decrease. They continued to increase to meet the community need across the country. What was changed was that in the accomplishments, instead of telling people how many applications were received and how many were funded, this particular program switched their accomplishment structure to be telling you how many were funded, and they broke it into what types of organizations were getting the funding. Frankly, this is more meaningful information for us in terms of forecasting. It, yes, is helpful to know how highly competitive is a program, but knowing what types of organizations are getting the funding can help you to decide, do we look like any of these recent grantees? Structurally, do we look like any of these grantees? If we saw that it was all hospitals that were receiving this funding, unless we were a hospital looking at it, we'd probably want to talk to our local hospital about partnering and having them be the lead. So this can help us looking forward to think about, are we the right organization to be the lead or not? We can still be interested in the funding program, but we might want to talk to perhaps some of our collaborative partners. Now, if you're in this tool and you're excited, you have found things of interest. We're saying this opioid program was of interest. Where would you go? Again, we're back in time for a moment. We would go to grants.gov. Well, grants.gov has also continuously been evolving. What is stayed the same? Grants.gov is the portal. It is the central clearinghouse where federal applications must be posted and then applied for. Yes, there are secondary portals that some agencies use, but everything has to be posted in grants.gov. So if I found something in sam.gov that I was interested in, I want to find it in grants.gov. I want to find whether it has anything in currently posted or forecasted. Is it something recently closed, or is it so past closed, so old that it has been archived? Way back when, in 2018, I took a screen grab of what it looked like for this program when it was closed. There was nothing you could do. It was closed. It was passed. You couldn't open it. When you looked at the synopsis, you could see how many people did they think they would award. The answer is 45 in the bottom left-hand corner. You could see that they thought there would be $34 million in total funding, but they thought they would grant $1.5 million to each organization. And you can see when did it open, and that it was open for just a little over 30 days. So speedy, fast in terms of how long you would have had to apply. So this is helpful though, because if I'm saying I'm interested in this program, this last year it was open in May. I wonder if I should think about being ready if it opens again in May this upcoming year. Well, based on these screen grabs, it's only been open once. So I'm not sure it's the best for the forecasting idea and for the pre-planning activity, because there's not a strong level of predictability. It had only been open once. What I could do, if it's something that has only been open once, even way back in 2018 before some other changes were made in the portal, I could always subscribe. Is there anything I want to know? If anything changes in this opportunity, is there any way I could subscribe to my search results to prevent FOMO? Yes, fear of missing out on a federal grant opportunity opening. We want to avoid that FOMO. So I could subscribe to that. But my work wouldn't be done. If it was a one-time thing and I thought it was a good idea and I thought I might be interested, I could go to a search engine of my choice. I've shown you what it looked like on Google at the time, and I could look to see if the guidelines existed. The guidelines for past opportunities were not always and are not always attached to the record in grants.gov. By finding the past set of guidelines, I can't apply, but I can read what was required in terms of activities. What were the budget constraints? What were the matching details? Was it no match required or was it 20% match required? And I can think about if this opportunity opened and it looked kind of like this next year, would it be a fit for us or not? Would we want to apply? We might set it down. We might say, oh, that's not actually for us. Or you might say, oh, that's actually really good for our partner. I should talk to them about if they'd like to prepare in case it opens again this next year. Those are the competitive advantage types of conversations that you want to have. If those conversations are happening before something opens in grants.gov, they will look and sound different in each of your tribal organizations, but those conversations are a positive outcome that show that federal forecasting is helping you. Because having the conversations before it opens gives you that competitive advantage rather than waiting until the day it lands in grants.gov and starts accepting applications. Let's bring it closer to current day. We're not quite there. We're awfully close. Remember, I've been taking screen grabs of this opportunity for years. Now I know that to make this work, it's some tiny print on the screen, but I've got some arrows pointing at the things that are most important that I want you to understand. In grants.gov, the opportunity status when you're on that website for forecasted is the spot that I want you to pay attention to. By clicking that filter, you are definitely going to be able to meet the beverage at the desk rule. The reason is that you are not looking at 2,400 or 2,500 different opportunities. You are only looking at those that are anticipated to open, but are not open yet. When you're looking at the full results on the right-hand side, the way you can tell that that filter has been applied is that the opportunity status only says forecasted in that column over to the right. Again, these are opportunities that are not yet open, but are anticipated to be open maybe soon-ish. The timeline is usually posted to the right. Now, I'm really curious, how many of you, please let me know with a Y for yes and N for no, how many of you have ever looked at this forecasted status in grants.gov before? Could you let me know if you've looked at this forecasted status before? It is one of my favorite things. Once I learned what it was in grants.gov, I'm like, oh, well, that takes the pressure off in terms of feeling like I have to watch all 2,500 things. What I care the most about is forecasted because I want that competitive advantage. The analogy I make is that if you were standing at a cross-country meet, as I am apt to do during cross-country season for high schoolers in far, far upstate New York, my daughter's a runner. And so when you're at this event and there's all of these high school varsity runners standing on the starting line, getting ready to go, if the official for the race says, you in the blue penny and you over here in the yellow and you over here in the maroon, the three of you runners, you can start early. You get a 5-minute head start. Everyone will be like, what? Now, it's not a guarantee that those three runners are going to win. Absolutely not. You never know what's going to happen in a race. But they have a significant competitive advantage. They're not jostling each other, jockeying for position, there we go, through the starting line, where it narrows down and they're trying to get into almost single file as maybe they go into the woods. They had a nice, clean, clear path. And they might be the one that comes across first, or second, or third. But they are likely to be up front. When we think about grant applications at the federal level, what puts you up front? Your score. knowing some of your plans in advance, talking to collaborative partners are things that make you score higher because you've had more time to thoughtfully approach your application. Forecasting is the equivalent of being the runner that got pointed to by the official and they said, you get a 5-minute head start. As we think about what forecasting will mean for us, you might say, Diane, I need it to be forecasting related to my work. Yes, you do. When you're in the different records in SAM.gov, so the first tool we looked at, there was a number at the very top of the record, and there is a number at the very top of each and every record you will look at that is called the CFDA number, or now they'll call it the assistance number. They mean the same thing. This is 16.838. This number is on all records related to the funding program I showed you, that opioid-related funding program. If I looked for just that funding number, please only show me things grants.gov related to that funding program. There is nothing in this screen grab related to it. There were no forecasted opportunities. But there's an awful lot of closed history, isn't there? This went from being a program that only existed once to having many, not just traditional service programs that replicated the first year, but had fellowship programs and had innovation programs and had technical assistance programs. There was a lot of related work to support the direct service being done. By looking at this full list, what does this tell me? Oh, thanks for asking. So glad you did. What this tells you is when might you want to plan for it to open again. I'm going to quickly read you some dates off of this particular image. So the first time we saw it, it opened in May. The next time it opened, it was in April of the following year. Then it opened in February. Then it opened in May. Then it opened in April. Then it opened in January of 23. Based on the data I've just read to you, which month do you think it might open in a future year? I have everything from January through May for the different answers. Why don't you let me know in the public chat what you think? This program, over the many years that it has been open, has opened anywhere from January. We saw that it opened in May one time. If you were thinking about that running Head Start analogy, what month would you want to think about being ready for it to open in again? Which one would feel like the best month to try and be prepared for? Anything in the calendar year is a welcome answer in the public chat. We're all learning about forecasting together, so there is no judgment on what your suggestion is, but I'm curious to know what month would you want to prepare for based on what you can see in this particular screen grab from grants.gov. It's opened in May, it's opened in April, it's opened in February, it's opened in May again, it's opened in April, it's opened in March. When do we think we want to be ready for it? I'm rather conservative when it comes to forecasting. The earliest month that has ever opened is usually my answer. I like to see what sort of preparation I can do. I'd love to be ready because what if it opens in January again? So I'd like to be ready by January. But now, Janine, I see you said February, and if we were doing averaging of timelines, that also is not quite as conservative. I don't like to be surprised. So I really like to go with what was the first month in the last few years that it's been open, when it opened. But early in the calendar year, I do think is a good approach to try and get as much conversation done in advance as possible. Well, regardless of which month you pick, what is it that we want to do for our homework? Yep, I saw it in the public chat. Subscribe to the updates so that we don't miss any updates happening related to what we have just searched for. The good news is that we can download the very recent instructions. We can still go searching in our search engines to see what else we can learn, but the past instructions are typically available right within that last opportunity, the last time it opened. So I want to grab those. I could still, as I said, come into a search engine and search for them to see if I learn anything else. Because while I might end up on the funding agency website, I might find some different technical assistance webinars or some frequently asked questions. I might find lots of great information that is far more than, yes, this very important past set of guidelines that tells me what was required and how would I be scored. But it is helpful to get as much information from the agency as possible, because ultimately, I think I want to talk to the agency before it opens again. The federal agency is most likely to answer my email or phone call in a more conversational way than a ask your question and we will post it on a frequently asked list. They are most likely to answer us outside of the period of time when the grant is open. When we are in forecasted in grants.gov, this view is constantly changing, in the sense that it is not a required status for agencies to use. The number of forecasted opportunities, the number of posted opportunities is evolving. It can look different each and every day. Having a free grants.gov login so that you can save your search results, that you can subscribe to your updates and get it right in your email inbox is my favorite way to reduce my FOMO, again, my fear of missing out on a grant opportunity. Can you let me know in the public chat how many of you have a free grants.gov account that you're using so that you get information directly into your inbox? It's not about your organization's application account, but you, to your direct individual work email. Let me know if you do. Y for yes and for no. How many of you already have that free individual account so that you can get the results directly to your inbox? If you do not, I would recommend it as some optional homework. I get it. I can't assign homework. That's not going to work out so well. How am I going to hold you accountable? But if you don't already have that, I would encourage you to put that perhaps on your to-do list for the next week or so. When we think about what we're looking for forecasted and coming in, the screen grab that I have right here on the moment, well, 559. It changes each and every day. We're going to play with this example, and we're going to give you a chance to play in just a little bit. Hang tight. We're going to see how many there are today. But the number is always changing. What else could we do? What else could we subscribe to? Certainly, getting every forecasted opportunity in your inbox is not going to overwhelm how much you have to read every day. It will be a short list. It does not matter about all the other things that are changing or not changing in the grant space. It has never been a really long, hour-long worth of reading. Never that big. But you can also search by your keyword, housing, health, and you could say, I want to only see forecasted things related to, and in my example that I've got on the screen, I only want to pay attention to things that are forecasted, or I guess I'll watch the posted too, related to opioid. And I want to pay attention and get those search results. Using grants.gov is a really great way to understand, of course, yes, what is open, what we could technically click apply for. But that's not why I want us thinking about it today. I only want us thinking about it for what are we forecasting? What is it that we're going to prepare for so that we can have that theoretical running race head start. So a quick toggle between some of the things we've seen. In the past, I could type in my 16.838, my assistance number, my CFDA number, and I could see what is related to that particular funding program. Literally a few weeks ago, because of how data is being updated by different federal agencies and departments, which is an ongoing process, it could happen at any time, there was nothing in grants.gov related to 16.838. There was lots of other information about this particular funding program, but what I was actually trying to do was prepare for your session. And I was like, uh-oh, where'd the information go? And I tried it in sam.gov too, and it wasn't there. So I did what any good grant professional would do. I went and I had some coffee and I shut the tools and I waited and I came back a few days later. I'm like, it's not urgent. I don't need to have my slides done for a few more days. And I came back to the tools and I put in 16.838 and hey, look, there it is. And I went back to sam.gov and I put in 16.838 and hey, look, there it all is again. So the reason I bring that up is that there is always ongoing change, ongoing data maintenance, database changes. And so I encourage you, if there's something you think you would expect to see history of, don't find it. You don't have to take the coffee break the same way I do. Seltzer's fine, hot tea's fine, water, whatever it is. But I'd step away and maybe give it a day or two and then come back and see if it's been updated. Something about the database, something about the system didn't have it there for us. So I want to just be really transparent about what it means when there's data that's being added or reviewed. And so it just might mean that your view related to forecasting might not be what you expect in the moment. But I wouldn't give up. I would come back again. When we are looking at the different tools, there's some other things that are fantastic. I've given you 3 things that are in your digital toolbox so far. The federal budget, always where we want to start, understanding big trends that are being talked about. Second is sam.gov, the System of Award Management, is what that stands for. But our assistance listings in there help us to think about the history of the programs that have existed, what they have looked like over time, up, down, in terms of changes. Grants.gov, yes, is where we technically apply for federal grants, but we're thinking about it for forecasting because we want to know what are some agencies putting in there saying, hey, we expect this to open and giving us a date. The third, nope, that was 3. Grants.gov was 3. This is 4. Number 4 is usaspending.gov. The reason that usaspending.gov is helpful is that it shows us who, by organization name, has been getting those grants. Could you let me know in the public chat, I'll put in a quick delineator there, why for yes and for no, how many of you have ever used usaspending.gov? How many of you have used usaspending.gov before? This, to me, is the same idea as looking at recent grantees for foundations, the way that you might find them in their IRS 990 form. This is the public federal version of who are the current and recent grantees. If this is a tool that you have not used, I would say that this is a fun one, in like a grant fund sort of way, to bookmark. So thank you again, Brooke, to sharing the links. If you want to add usaspending.gov to your bookmarks, the way I would use it is after I have found an opportunity that I'm very interested in, I would want to consider looking for it in usaspending.gov to see what kinds of organizations have been getting the money. if they're all institutions of higher ed, and that's not our organizational structure, it's unlikely that we're going to get funded. We're so different from everyone else. Or we might be in usaspending.gov and say, oh, it's almost all departments of health. Unless we're the Department of Health, perhaps we should talk to our Department of Health and talk about collaborating on the application. It might also show you that some of your collaborative partners are already getting the funding and that you don't want to compete against them, that you might be better off to talk to them about working together and becoming collaborative partners. Maybe you can become a sub-grantee to them instead of competing for the dollars. When we have organizations, one that already gets and one that's trying to compete for the dollars, sometimes that can actually hurt the community as a whole. If they're wondering, wait a second, why aren't you collaborating together? That might actually do more harm than good. There is one more. I'm not going to call this number 5. Technically, yes, you're right. It is the 5th link, but I'm not elevating it to the point where I'm going to say this has to be one of your awesome tools in your toolbox for federal forecasting. It might be, but it's a really new tool, and so it's still being built out. It's really more beta if we're thinking about tech. So this is the Federal Program Inventory. It is not a replacement for any of the tools I have talked about yet. You can search by agency name, you can search by category type, you can search by program type, is it cooperative or is it a competitive grant? You can search by eligible applicant type. All the other tools are also searchable by that. So this is closest in nature to the assistance listings in sam.gov, but it is not its replacement as of at least now. It is still very much in beta. And so what I wanted to highlight is that it still contains some of the key basic information. So if I follow that opioid story all the way here to this new tool that was released last year, I'm still going to learn some good information. It'll show me the different expenditures that are happening. So I do learn things, but it is not a fully comprehensive tool that has all the things in it. So I would use it to maybe spot check some information, or if I happened to, while doing forecasting research, if I found a spot where I was like, wait, is the data being updated, or is there something about the record in the database that's being changed? I might come here to see if there's any different information or more. To me, it's filling in some final puzzle pieces in terms of the information we might learn. Now, you've been so generous in listening to an example about the opioid funding program. I thought, well, let's follow a second one just through a slightly quicker path. I have not been taking screen grabs of this particular funding opportunity for as many years. Although now that I've started, I'll probably quickly end up with many years because this is a funding program that I've written for multiple times. Just hadn't thought about grabbing all of those details for just the joy of sharing and teaching about federal forecasting. So now what's on your screen? Now we're going to pretend that we are all thinking about distance learning and telemedicine. This is a program that is made available through the USDA. And I have the red arrow on the screen pointing at the assistance listing number. It is also in many tools, it's referred to as the CFDA number. In this case, it is 10.855. So I can see on the left-hand side that the menu I'm reading is the same as what I showed you before for that opioid program. Overview, authorizations, financial information, etc. Please note how everything in sam.gov, the assistance listings, has some form of contact information. It may or may not be the person who is currently in charge of implementing and managing that program, but it gives you a place to start when you're trying to make contact with a federal agency before you apply. If we think about this distance learning and telemedicine program, often referred to as DLT for short, If we like what we read in the assistance listings, we think that this is a program that we might be interested in, what would we look at next? That's right, we would want to go find it in grants.gov. What you can see in this screen grab is that this was originally posted in 2025 in January, and it closed in March. So it was open for, well, 2 months. That was great. It's nice to have one open that long. And a lot of folks knew it was coming because of relationships with the different USDA staff members who said it's going to be out early in the year, and people had been planning. It's a program that's been out for a long time. The different attachments have been pretty similar recently. What changes are where the priority points are given. But there was a lot of prep work that people could do that would make them, as they consider, can I be one of the 75 potential awardees or not? There was lots of information available that would help a potential applicant absolutely take off. That official at that running race pointed at them and they said, yep, I'm going to try to get a few miles ahead. I'm going to see how far I can get in that 5 minutes. Again, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to get the funding, but it gives a competitive advantage. If we had seen the DLT opportunity in SAM.gov and we came into grants.gov and we didn't find it with quick searching, what we could do is put in that assistance listing number, that 10.855 that we saw just a moment ago on the other slide. And what I would want to do is have as many of the opportunity statuses clicked as were available. So in the example on the screen, you can see I have forecasted, posted, closed, and archived, all open. What that produces are all of the results, all of the archived opportunities for this particular funding program. And you can see that it had opened in January, May, April, February, January, April, December, interesting, February, and then January. So back to our original question for that opioid program, we see a wide range of open dates and months. When would we want to be ready? Following my, again, rather conservative approach, the fact that it opened once in December is all I need to say, I want us to be ready by the end of November. It might open in December. And my goodness, December is always very full on calendars and people are taking vacations. We need to be ready. What if it happened? Also, what if it opens right in the new year on the calendar? We should just really make sure we're ready. So that past data of when did it open in all the past years helps us to think about when do I want to be ready in case it opened again. I could have also tried by coming in and thinking about putting in the keyword distance learning. Oh, wow. Putting in the keyword distance learning on the exact same day as those first two screen grabs. Let's see, forecasted 146 grants had the phrase distance learning in their descriptions. 298 posted. So currently accepting opportunities and applications had the words distance learning linked together in their text. And 2,284, wow, closed. Not even talking about the 15,761 that are archived. This does not meet our beverage at the desk rule. There is too much here to consider. Now, I got lucky. As I looked at what it was that was closed, I was able to quickly find and show you distance learning. But this is why having just a keyword is usually too much. There's an overwhelming amount of information that might come out that has no relevance for your organization as an eligible type or within the agency you're interested in. So that is not usually where I start. If I'm really digging for something, I might try it, but it's usually the last thing that I would consider because of the volume of things we have to dig through. We talked about your free grants.gov account. It is such a delight to not stress about, I have to remember to go check once a Friday, or I have to remember to go check every Monday, whatever cadence you want, to not have to do that and to know that the tech's going to work and it's in your inbox. Delightful, absolutely delightful in my eyes for taking some of the stress out of federal grants. I did want to show you that federal program inventory, the newest tool, the newest kid on the block. It does have DLT in it. We can see that same program number, our 10.855. What's interesting about it, again, recognizing that it is a new tool, it does have the program expenditures for 23, 24, and a projection for 25. You can see just the very tippy top of that bar graph. But then if you go into additional program information, like, wait a second, I know the program existed and gave lots of money between 2018 and 2024. They're still building the information. So it is not a complete record. That's why I suggested that it is just one of your tools. It's going to maybe fill in some puzzle pieces worth of information, but it is not completely accurate. Our usaspending.gov, looking at who has gotten the funding before, there we go. We put in our 10.855 and we find all of the contracts and grants related to this funding program. The only filter I put on it was that assistance listing number, the 10.855. I could have also put some specific dates. I could have looked at maybe just the last 2 fiscal years or maybe the last 3. The list of grantees every year is very long, so I don't need many, many years of data to get a pretty quick understanding of the types of groups that are being funded. I want to flag that you might also consider usaspending.gov. If you say, did that partner organization get this grant last year? If you think maybe they did, you can search in usaspending.gov by a specific organization name and see which federal grants they have received. So anyone is welcome to do that. I can do all of this searching without having to worry about a login. Again, all of the tools we have looked at are free. When we look at our toolbox, there is one other tool, and this has been around for a long time. It's called the Federal Register. It is the daily journal of the United States government. I do not recommend that you have to read the whole thing. It is, to me, like the U.S. federal budget, where I told you my recommendation is to read the department section that is relevant to your work or the agency section related to your work. Same is true of the Federal Register. Unless you're like me, where sometimes some of those Coast Guard rule changes are interesting because you live right on a big body of water, I could skip that section most days if I read it. So when you read the Federal Register and you click through to get in, I would pay attention only to the department or the agencies that you're interested in. This is where it will tell you if they are accepting public comment, if there's an upcoming new rule. It is where there will often be information about upcoming grants. In fact, it is the place. Now, this is a COVID example, but this was a big example of where the Federal Register actually placed a funding opportunity, and it was the place that everybody had to keep coming back to when they learned about it. They posted the telehealth program that FCC had released, so the Federal Communications Commission. It was posted to the Federal Register. That was the key place to go get more information and grab your own copy of the PDF. So that also can happen. Do you need to read the entire thing every day? No. I would read just your section. And I would argue that on all these tools, you could put them in a folder, filter them, and you could look at the things that are related to your department or agency, you could do it once a week. And that would keep you current and understanding what is happening related to the program, or maybe even programs that you're interested in. But once you find one, I gave you that example, I found that opioid one, and if in that theoretical example, I'm like, we're going to apply for this. I've got some plans. I know when we want to be ready for. Or I gave you the USDA example, the distance learning and telemedicine. We're going to be ready. We want to apply for that. What do you do next? I recommend that you look at who are the contacts and you reach out. Try to have a conversation over email or phone. You want to find out if they're still going to be managing the program moving forward. Maybe you're going to have some questions that you would like to have them help answer based on last year's guidelines that you have read in their entirety. You might have a question about partnerships or about different key activities that are required. You might ask what they anticipate their technical assistance program looking like for that funding once it opens. They may or may not know, but they may be able to tell you what the rules have been in the past and what they expect that they might be moving forward. The tools that we have looked at today, as I mentioned, that newest one, the program inventory, it's not a must-have. It's an okay to use and fill in some things, at least for right now. The ones on the screen right now, these are the please bookmark, please use. Remember, they're all free. If anything ever tries to charge you, you made it in through some ad, go out, try again, manually type in the address instead. But these tools are your toolbox equivalent of some of your most basic things, your hammer, your screwdriver, your tape measure. These are your free, important tools that you will use frequently. I'm going to talk about then what. We found the thing, we talked hopefully, or we emailed with the staff member who might be part of managing this program. But I would like to have you test one element for me about these tools. What I would like to have you do, please, is to open your web browser, open a new tab. Don't click on the red bar in the webinar viewer because we'll lose you. Don't click on that part, but if you could add a new tab or make a new window, and if you could please type in grants.gov. What I would like to know, and I'm there now myself in my other tab, so I know the answer to this. I want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable getting to grants.gov and changing the opportunity status so that all you see are forecasted opportunities. What I would like to ask of you is how many forecasted opportunities are visible in grants.gov today. This is a group contest. I would like to see how many of you can get there and type in the number. This isn't a race to be the first. I want to see actually how many of you can get to grants.gov on your own. Click on search grants in the upper left-hand corner and tell me how many forecasted opportunities are visible today. All right, and the contest has commenced. We're trying to see how many of you can get there and tell us this. I want to have you confirm. Can you see the same number? Yeah, once you come back to the public chat, you're going to see what your colleagues are saying. So far, so good. We're all seeing the same big number. But then there's a second part to the challenge. If you're like, Diane, I did it. I got the number in. Here's the second part to the challenge. I would like for you to type your big policy keyword. For some of you, it might be health. For some of you, it might be housing. For some of you, it might be workforce development. It's up to you. You all have different big words that you're going to use to think about your big policy goals. Please type that keyword into the keyword box. Only leave forecasted checked and click search. I want to know how small does your I typed in the keyword health And my forecasted number on the left-hand side of my screen went to 130. You're welcome to try and replicate my search and see if you can have it happen, or to please use the search word that is most meaningful for you. Maybe you type in diabetes and you try to see what happens. Maybe, Penny typed in housing and it quickly went to 8. By only looking at forecasting, you are quickly getting your results down to something that is going to meet the beverage at the desk rule. If you look at what's forecasted and you say, oh, I like one of these, maybe, Penny, you're the last one in there for the moment in the public chat, say, oh, I particularly like this 1 out of 8. Now where do you go? Now you want to go read about it in sam.gov. Now you want to go read about it in usaspending.gov. And if you still think, oh, this is a nice idea, I like it, I might come back, and I'm going to download, I'm going to see if any of those opportunities have a closed version. Last year's opportunity or 6 months ago's opportunity, so that I can get those guidelines and still further confirm that I am interested in this opportunity. Oh, I love it. And seeing the different keywords you're using, it came down to 65 when you put in families, it came down to 41 when you did youth. You're trying to say, what are the things that I could get that running head start for? How can I use my keywords to continuously narrow my results? And then, based on what I read, that is my 1 or 2 things I'm most excited about, I want to go learn about them in the other tools. I don't want you forecasting. Heather, I see you said when you put in families, it went down to 65. I am not suggesting that you should think about pre-planning and forecasting for 65 opportunities this next year. No, too many. What I want you to do is think about, what did the forecasting tools help you think about for pre-planning for 1 or 2 opportunities? Not, or like youth was 41, foster was 26. No, still too big. 1, maybe 2 a year. What does that mean? You found the 1 or the 2. You started at literally thousands, right? If we take off all of our search criteria and we just go back to grants.gov and start fresh, today, if I summed my forecasted and posted, that means there is 1,586 things. If I'm only worried about the things accepting applications, today it's 1,282. Big picture, that's a rather low number. Often we see that up around 2,500 currently. We're at a low volume. So that's a lot of things that you click apply to. By the time it's open, by the time I can click apply, all those other runners that the official pointed at have already started the running race. I want to worry about my forecasts. But worrying about my forecasts means I have read everything I can for them in my tools, in my sam.gov, in grants.gov, in usaspending.gov, and I have as many different puzzle pieces ready as possible about what does the program or project look like? What do I think it might look like this next time it opens? This is our best understanding. It is not a guarantee it will look like that. It is likely to change from 1 year to the next. Slight nuances in policy changes or changes in questions or scoring based on what they learned last year. So what I want you to do is now think about the pre-planning activities. I do not want you writing the application. It is too soon. You should not do that. It is a very high risk that you will have to rework the entire, if not huge portions of the application. What I want you to think about is what sort of planning work and drafting, high-level drafting, could you get done? The first ideal is that you would prepare a logic model. I love to talk about logic models and theories of change, and I'm going to point you to the recording in the Native Learning Center because, well, I can't really do it justice in just a few minutes so the webinar is over. But your first step is to draft your logic model. It's not something you're going to upload as a final document. If it helps to put a watermark behind the document that says draft, great, do that. This is for discussion. This is for brainstorming, for planning. You will have to revisit and finalize this when it does open. And then, in fact, you may have to finalize it in a way that gets uploaded to the grants.gov portal. If you were to make it through the conversations with your peers and your collaborative partners to talk about your logic model, I want you to pat yourself on the back. If you have a yellow dingy bell handy at your desk, I want you ringing it in celebration. That is a tremendous head start. You should be proud of yourself. If it didn't open yet in grants.gov, though, don't give up yet. Don't let up on your running pace in our theoretical cross-country event. No, I want you to now talk about your budget. How much would it cost to implement the program that you have laid out a rough design for in your logic model? You could choose to use federal budget forms so that you can pencil in some very rough budget numbers. It is theoretical. Watermark draft, this is not final. You don't know exactly how much money is going to be available. This is you taking your forecasted knowledge and saying, let's try to see if we can get a little bit of a further head start so that we are increasing our competitiveness. This is work you would have to do anyway. If you waited for it to open, you would have to do this work anyway about talking about your budget, but you would be under the pressure of the deadline clock. By doing it now, you're able to have some thoughtful reflection time. Let it sit, see what happens, see what difference, maybe a collaborative partner has to talk to the rest of their leadership before they can commit. They're able to do that while not under the pressure of the deadline clock. Lots of positive things happen that influence your overall competitiveness. You get your budget draft done and you're still not open in grants.gov, another pat on the back, another yellow dingy bell. Why don't we lay out our work plan? Some of our key activities. Maybe we list staff or collaborative partners that would be responsible. Maybe we put some very high-level timeline details to it. We might even, pro tip, we might go in last year's guidelines for the opportunity we're considering and use last year's work plan template in our drafting. It's not finalized, it's still watermark draft, but that's pretty cool. We drafted using the structure from last year's application to help us think about how we might show and tell our story. You got that done too? I mean, a huge round of applause, pat on the back, and another yellow dingy bell. Wow. If you have collaborative partners, this is a time not to sign legal agreements related to the partnership, but this is the time to talk about them and maybe start drafting them, because the legal process for two organizations coming to a federal grant to do a memorandum of understanding or agreement together takes both parties' normal approval and legal process some time. So that's a fantastic way to use some of that head start time you have been given. And if you make it that far, it's time to call it good. Celebrate. Maybe have a pizza party, maybe have some morning bagels. Always willing to celebrate with coffee. But that's the time to say, we did it. We did everything we could for a head start. Based on forecasting, we did some pre-planning, and we are ready for when it opens. Now, forecasting with a little bit about pre-planning in 90 minutes. That is a lot. And you've been fantastic at engaging in the chat box for me, but I'm thinking you might have some questions about these tools and how and when to use them. Public chat is still open for your questions. Go ahead, start typing. I know it takes a minute to get those in there, but I also want to acknowledge that sometimes with stuff like this, a long list of tools that just were given to you in a digital toolbox, and you're not going to have a lot of questions necessarily until you're doing it for the first time. Until you fill up your water bottle or whatever you're going to have at the desk, and you sit down and you say, okay, I've got those notes from Diane. I've got my 4 websites open. Now I have some questions. I'm happy to answer questions at any time, whether it is today or it's in 3 weeks or it's in 3 months when you sit down to do forecasting, drop me an email. Again, this is constantly evolving. That is the one true statement over the last 20 years of being a grant professional on this side, always evolving. And I guarantee you, it will continue to evolve. So if you have any questions about any of the tools or what's changing or what you're seeing, please feel free to drop me a note. My email is diane@dhleonardconsulting.com. If you would prefer not to have anything else in your inbox and you want to instead ask a question on like a LinkedIn direct message, anything like that, happy to do that too. We are happy to answer your questions as a team wherever you want to ask your question. All right, with that, I think I'm going to pass it back to Brooke. I don't see any questions in the chat. I do see the link to the feedback survey. I do love getting your input and feedback after our sessions. So please, if you could take a brief moment, I would be grateful for that. But I think, Brooke, we're back to you. I'm not sure, Brooke, I can't hear you. I'm not sure if that's just me, but.
You know?
Yes, I can hear you again.
Sorry about that, guys. Okay, that link to today's webinar feedback survey is in the chat for you. Thank you so much, Diane, for another incredible presentation. This is really helpful information as everybody navigates different changes. I did go ahead and include a link to the recording of how to use a logic model to increase grant seeking success. If you just go up 2 messages, that is in the chat for you as well. We hope you can join us for our next webinar. That is going to be next week on the 8th. This will be about the 0% tax bracket with your instructor, Shantae Moore. It'll be 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Pacific, or 10 a.m. Alaska. You can access this as well as our other recorded webinars on our YouTube channel. There is a playlist called the Catheta Webinar Archive. And we hope you can check out our other upcoming training events. We post about them on all our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. If you're a podcast listener, we have our own in-house produced podcast, the Hopathanga Native American podcast. You can listen to that wherever you listen to your podcasts. Or if you're like me and you prefer to watch the videos of people with their special guests, then you can check that out on our YouTube channel as well. All right, folks, but we recognize you could spend your morning, your afternoon, anywhere else, and we love that you opted to spend it on your professional development and spend it with us here on the webinar, so we thank you. I'm going to go ahead and leave the class open so that you guys have access to all those links in the chat. There are more links in the shared notes, but I am going to go ahead and turn off the recording.